sit here and then we'll call you guys up so you don't have to look at that light the whole time. Okay. Are we ready? Well, I can introduce and okay. All right, good afternoon, everyone, and sorry for the delay getting started. Thank you so much for your attention today. My name's Kelly Oskvig, and I'm thrilled to be with you here at the Ocean Pavilion. I'm a senior program officer working for the Ocean Studies Board at the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. And we are private, nonprofit institutions that provide independent and objective analysis and advice to solve complex problems and inform public policies. So a few fun facts. I delivered these yesterday, but I'll say it again. We were founded during the U.S. Civil War by Abraham Lincoln. Our first study was to examine uniformity of weights, measures, and coins in relation to domestic and international commerce. One of the committee's recommendations was for the United States to adopt the metric system for weights and measures. So we're still waiting. Not all advice was taken, but a legacy of providing science-based, neutral, unbiased guidance was set. So fast forward 160 years, still waiting. We've been doing quite a bit of work over the last decade to develop guidance on climate intervention strategies and decarbonization. A few of the reports are highlighted on this slide. And I'm going to skip through some of these. And then as part of the Academies, the Ocean Studies Board, which is the arm that I work in, we focus on issues specific to ocean conservation and stewardship. So many of these reports are climate related, but not solely. So a few of the reports you might all be interested in are included here. But the purpose of today's talk, a heated case for ocean observation, stems from a mix of highly societally relevant recent events, the devastating marine heat waves I'm sure you've all heard about, and recommendations from a report we released in 2019, Sustaining Ocean Observations to Understand Future Changes in Earth's Climate. The QR code to access this report is shown here, and just a note, you can download this report and any of our reports at no cost from nap.edu. So the first half of today's session will cover 4 short presentations, and then we'll have some discussion and Q&A. But first, we're delighted to have U.S. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse with us to provide a few opening remarks. Sheldon Whitehouse represents Rhode Island in the United States Senate, where he's fighting to position America as a leader in clean energy economy and protect the ocean state from the consequences of climate change. Senator Whitehouse is one of the Senate's leading climate champions and is co-founder of the Senate Oceans Caucus, where he plays a key role in crafting bipartisan policies to protect our ocean. Senator, thank you so much for fighting these important causes, and thank you for joining us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you, thank you. Let me start by saying what a pleasure it is to be here at the COP28 Ocean Pavilion. I can remember coming to the Paris COP, and as we walked through the gate, being rushed by people saying they are about to remove the last mentions of oceans from the text of the Paris Agreement. Can you stop it? And I went to Secretary Kerry, and we did, and oceans survived in the Paris COP, and it just keeps getting bigger and better, and it's important that that be the case because oceans are so central to the climate problem. My favorite new statistic involves the zettajoule. Those of you, we have a lot of scientists in the room, so you all know what a joule is, O-U-L-E, not E-W-E-L. And a zettajoule is a joule with 21 zeros behind it. So it's a colossally big number. And it is so big a number that 1/2 of a zettajoule is the entire energy production and consumption of the human species on planet Earth. So all of our use of energy sums up to 1/2 a zettajoule. And for the price of the fossil fuel component of that 1/2 zettajoule of energy, we are adding 14 zettajoules of heat into the oceans every single year. Multiple Hiroshima-sized nuclear explosions worth of heat per second. And obviously that is changing things. It has eliminated the winter flounder in Narragansett Bay, which was my wife's PhD subject. It has moved the lobster industry from Narragansett Bay and out of Connecticut northward, and it's climbing northward through Maine and will be out beyond Maine before long. It is damaging and destroying coral reefs, which are the incubators of the ocean. Over the Thanksgiving holidays, I was diving in Beckway, thanks to my wife, and when we rolled in and let the air out of the BCs and started to sink, the first thing that showed through the water was the bleached out white tips of the staghorn coral. And then as you sank down, you saw the rest of everything. That was terrific. But I've been there for a while. This was the first sign of ocean bleaching. So it's going on steadily, and we have to get ahead of it, whether it's fisheries or sea level rise or deoxygenation. Our future as a species really depends on the health of our oceans. Unfortunately, because we're terrestrial, we don't pay anywhere near as much attention to the health of the oceans as we should. So we're busy loading them up with acidification. We're busy loading them up with heat. We're busily stripping down the fisheries with aggressive and often illegal fishing methods, and we continue to use the oceans as a dump for all sorts of different kinds of waste, to the point where now some of our most wonderful oceanic mammals now are so filled with toxins that if you take a sample from their blubber, it tests as toxic waste. So we have an enormous amount of work to do. We have obligations to this planet and to other species that we are catastrophically failing at. And I'm really grateful to be here with all of you, because it is your work that is moving this forward. And it is your focus on oceans that makes sure that oceans have been an important part of the document that is being put together here, that oceans are not overlooked. And if I can ever be of any more help to you in helping to elevate those issues and bang away at these problems, I'm more than happy to do it. So good luck with your panels. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your outstanding work. And oceans, oceans, oceans. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Whitehouse. We appreciate your championship. All right, so now we'll get on to our panel. So I'd like to invite our panelists up, and we also have one panelist online. So Sofia Darmaraki is a principal investigator. Oh, there she is, at the Foundation for Research and Technology, HELLAS, or FORTH. Sofia is going to provide an overview of marine heat waves, the causes and the unknowns. And then Jim Edson and Lynne Talley, and you guys can come on up if you'd like, will provide some examples of how important sustained ocean observations are to understanding marine heat waves. Jim is a senior scientist at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute and lead PI for the Ocean Observatory Initiative. Lynne is a distinguished professor of oceanography at Scripps Institution of Oceanography at the University of California, San Diego. And then Tammy Russell, a PhD student in biological oceanography at Scripps Institution of Oceanography, will then show a few slides highlighting examples from her work of heat wave impacts on marine ecosystems. So welcome, everyone, and good to see you, Sofia. The floor is yours.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you just fine.
Okay, Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Kelly, for the introduction. I'm Sofia Darmaraki. I'm very happy to be part of this discussion panel for the Ocean Pavilion this year. I would like to therefore thank the National Academies institution for giving us the opportunity to speak about marine heat waves, a phenomenon which has gained a lot of attention over the last decade, mostly due to its adverse impacts on marine ecosystems and coastal communities in the global ocean. Kelly, would you mind switching the slides? Next, please. So together with James, Edson, Lynne, Tammy Russell, we aim today to present an overview of the topic, starting here with a definition of marine heat waves, their significance, the driving forces behind them, and what remains to be understood about their future trajectory under the influence of climate change. Next, please. So just to give a brief idea, this is a random sea surface temperature profile from several decades ago, revealing that extreme values were sporadic, resulting in occasional warm or cold episodes. In such a, let's say, stable climate, ecosystems evolved within specific thermal ranges. However, since the 1980s, the ocean has experienced accelerated warming, leading to more frequent extreme warm events, which now are called marine heat waves. The increased frequency and intensity of marine heat waves in recent years pose substantial challenges for marine ecosystems and the communities depending on them. Consider them as the oceanic counterparts to atmospheric heat waves, albeit their impacts are initially less conspicuous and actually quite diverse. Next. So this is a very nice infographic from the International Union for Conservation of Nature, summarizing the main impacts reported so far. Marine heat waves can persist for days to months, extending over thousands of kilometers at surface and penetrating hundreds of meters beneath the sea. Therefore, they can contribute to the intensification of extreme weather phenomena such as hurricanes, but they can also facilitate the development of ocean stressors like acidification or deoxygenation. One of the most important impacts, however, is that they trigger abrupt disruptions in biodiversity through species migration or habitat loss, with profound economic implication on fisheries, aquaculture, and tourist industries. Now, all these impacts have been documented over the last decades, where frequency and intensity of marine heat waves have been increasing, with their numbers actually projected to increase even more by the end of the century. Next. So, what does a marine heat wave look like? Qualitatively, it has been termed as a discrete, prolonged, anomalously warm water event in a particular location. Quantitatively, though, in this snapshot of the SST anomaly from the August 2023, which is relative to the 2003-2014 period, you can discern some regional temperature departures exceeding 2 or 3 degrees. For example, in the North Pacific, across the El Niño signature area of the Central East Pacific, in the Northwest Indian and Northeast Atlantic Oceans. By a widely accepted definition, these anomalies qualify as marine heat waves when they represent anomalies above the climatological 90th percentile of temperatures and when they persist for 5 days or more. It's worth noting here that this substantial warming shown here is in contrast to the recent past. Just imagine what the magnitude of these anomalies would be if they were compared to previous decades than 2003. And also, these values are a very good indicator of the warming expected in the years ahead. Next, please. What is of particular interest, though, besides the characteristics of marine heat waves and the intensities and frequencies, is the range of physical mechanisms that can cause them. And this is where the scientific community has given a lot of work recently. So these drivers, they include regional scale drivers such as enhanced insolation, reduced heat losses from the ocean to the atmosphere. Marine heat waves but can also be caused by horizontal transport of warm waters, but most commonly is a combination of air-sea heat exchanges with oceanic contributions. This is the, let's say, local scale drivers. We also have large scale drivers, which are related to the modes of climate variability, that they influence the frequency and duration of these events either directly or through large-scale atmosphere or oceanic teleconnection patterns. I'm sure you all are aware of El Niño Southern Oscillation or the Indian Ocean Dipole. Now, these climate modes operate from intra-seasonal to inter-annual timescales. And together with regional scale drivers, they determine the horizontal extent, depth, and other marine heat wave characteristics. Next, please. So up until recently, the predominant focus on research was on surface marine heat waves. But now there are evidence of heat being stored in deeper layers as well. So this is a recent analysis by NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which revealed a decade-long trend between 2003 and 2012, where warming occurred mostly below 10 meters and mainly between 100 and 300 meters below the sea surface. In these maps, areas with warming trends are illustrated in red and areas with cooling trends in blue. So while warming is more pronounced between, let's say, 100 to 300 meters in the Western Pacific and the Eastern Indian Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean shows no significant trends at any depth. And according to this study, the temperature signals below 300 meters were a bit inconclusive due to the lack of measurements. So the propagation of heat in deeper layers of the ocean has in turn sparked research interest on the vertical propagation of marine heat waves. Next, please. For example, there is a recent research off the coast of Sydney, which classified 3 types of marine heat waves: the shallow events that are confined to the surface layers, the extended events that span from the surface to deeper layers, and the subsurface events, which are very close to the bottom but have no surface signature. So this study identifies the stratification of the ocean as a key factor for the formation of subsurface events. The surface events are mostly linked to when the mixed layer depth, so this very shallow buffer zone between the atmosphere and the surface layers of the ocean, when this layer is super shallow and receives a lot of increased atmospheric heat fluxes, then we can have the development of surface marine heat waves. The extended marine heat waves, those with a surface extension up to a certain point in the water column, appear to be related to some large-scale ocean circulation. Surprisingly, events at the bottom, those that do not have a surface expression at all, they tend to be more prevalent when the water column is actually more stratified, so more stable, and typically they respond to downwelling favorable winds. Next, please. Now, despite the growing body of marine heat wave research and the drivers, the characteristics, their future evolution, there are still things that we have yet to understand. For instance, understanding how climate change will influence the vertical propagation of marine heat waves and identifying regions resistant to deeper layer warming, if there are any, are areas of ongoing exploration. Climate change is also expected to impact the physical mechanisms of these underlying future events, influencing the intensity and duration that different regions of the planet are going to experience in terms of marine heat waves. Finally, it's important to enhance monitoring and forecasting techniques of marine heat waves, but this is a topic which James will delve into further in a few minutes. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Sofia. Next, we have Jim. You want? Sure.
Hello, everyone. And Sofia, that was fantastic. Thanks so much for that great introduction. I just want to talk today, we're going to move on to now also additional measurements of marine heat waves. And I'll be talking about, and I'll just say, Jim Edson, I'm a senior scientist at Woods Hole. I'm also the lead PI of the Ocean Observatories Initiative, which is the National Science Foundation's research observatory. It's the WHOI is comprised of 5 active arrays supporting 900 sensors on 80 platforms. And the array, we started collecting data in 2016, and we're hoping to collect for 30 years. So sustained data is key here. It's an array of rather sophisticated instrumentation and infrastructure. I will focus on today the Pacific Northeast and the arrays that make up the global station PAPA, the regional cabled array, and the coastal endurance array off of the coasts of Oregon and Washington. I should mention that we're a collaboration of 3 institutions: Woods Hole Oceanographic, University of Washington, and Oregon State University. Most importantly, the data that I'm going to be talking about today is absolutely free of charge to anyone. You just need an internet connection, and you can get a lot of help from the people that are running the observatory. So please use the data. It's free for you to use. And which one? Oh, I got it. Only one more button. I don't want to spend too much time on this. I do want to show some results, but this is a cross-section of one of our array lines. There you can see there's 3, I don't know if there's a zapper here. No. There are 3 surface moorings and then subsurface moorings. They're profilers, fixed moorings, and gliders are used in this particular site. Some of the infrastructure is actually cabled back to shore, providing a lot of bandwidth for data and a lot of power for these measurements. Most of them, however, are run from surface moorings relying on solar panels and wind. So I'm going to move on because I want to show the results. So we've been talking about these marine heat waves. Probably the most famous was the warm blob that was clearly visible from space by our satellites. And within that blob, you can see the blue circles are 3 of the array elements I just talked about: PAPA, the endurance array off of Washington and Oregon, and axial, it represents the regional cabled array that connects some of those surface moorings. So the blob occurred, was a really, really strong event, 2014 to 2016. But interestingly, I think from this, and we've heard about the impacts that it had on things like biology, low chlorophyll, zooplankton changes, enhanced algal blooms, and fishery and marine mammals took a hit during the blob. Interestingly, if you look at the far left or far right corner, you see with all three of the array elements are seeing cooler temperatures at the surface. But if you don't have to go down very far, look at the very far, for you it would be far right, there's just this small layer of cool water. And beneath that, this warm anomaly persists for many years. So from satellites alone, you would never know that there's all of this heating beneath the surface. So that was one of our first look into. This is another way of plotting it. In this case, you're looking at 2 events: the blob's in blue. That's how I remember that. Blob's in blue. The more recent event in 2019 to 21 is in red. And this plot shows those 2 3-year periods as a function of depth, so going down. So a time series as function of depth. You can clearly see the blob. The blue line is, and the black line is the climatology. Okay, so the anomaly is referenced against that climatology. And so the blob itself is well above climatology during this entire period. Is this me? How do we turn that off? I have no idea. That is the oddest thing. Yeah, kill it. Take it away. Throw it in the dumpster. Throw it in a marine heat wave. That was odd. All right, well, let's picking up from that. Where was I? I was talking about the blob in blue, very persistent, high anomalous conditions. As you go down, and my apologies, we're trying to make these time series continuous, but you can still see there's a small area where the blob year is warm with depth, and you can see at the lowest level the 2019, the more recent marine heat wave event, really follows climatology very well. So for the blob, it remained warm all the way through the water column. For the 2019 period, it remained warm at the surface to mid-surface, and then really just adjusted to climatology after that. Anything else I want to say? I think that's good enough, because I want to get going for other speakers. And this is another way to show it. That last one was the measurements off the Oregon-Washington coast. These are the measurements in the Gulf of Alaska at Station Papa. What we see here is a blending of two observing systems. The top 300 meters is from NDBC. The PMAL group has been running Papa for a long, long time, so we have surface observations from that. What Woods Hole did in the WHOI is to add flanking moorings and profiling moorings that take us from 300 meters to 1,000 meters. So you can see this, and this agrees with what Sofia was saying. The maximum in the blob, and it's really evident when it was at its strongest, is not directly at the surface. There's a subsurface maximum where you see these. In this case, she was talking about around 50 meters. Yeah, right there, right between 0 and 100 meters, we get this maximum. It also shows that, again, the satellites would tell us that there was nothing going on. There was this cold water surface as we move into 2016, 2017, where you can clearly see that anomaly persists well into 2017 when it relaxes, and then picks up again, we can see here, 2019. So this is, well, we officially started the observatory. This was older data that we collected as well. But it starts in 2016. This is going to 2020. We have 3 more years to add to even to this time series. That's what we need to really understand these events, because they're all different, right? No heat wave is the same as other heat waves. So we need this data to figure out, one, the physical processes that are driving and maintaining these heat waves, but also the impact they have on the biology, the chemistry, right? And we have those measurements as well. Again, did I mention free for you to use, okay? So if you're a biologist and you want to look at how this is impacting the biology, go to ooi.org. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Jim. Lynne, you're up next.
Another pair of glasses. And my BGC friend. Let's see, there's a computer here. That's confusing. Okay, that doesn't matter. It's okay. Right, hi, I'm Lynne Talley. I'm a professor of oceanography at Scripps. I'll put our friend back here. I'm following on what Jim is talking about, the importance of having, pardon me? Yeah. Importance of having sustained long-term observations in the ocean in order to be able to look at the structure of these things that we see from the surface, from the satellite, but as has been really clearly illustrated, the big signal may not be at the surface, it may be just below. I'm going to be talking about the Argo profiling data observing system. This is also part of the Global Ocean Observing System. What Jim was describing were fixed locations where you have very intensive measurements at very fine time resolution. And the way we can map then things over the full ocean basins is with Argo. These are profiling floats. Here we are. Whoa, fell down. Ta-da. Luckily, I didn't bring a real one. Basically the size of a person with instruments on top. These go up and down between the surface and 2,000 meters every 10 days. And during the 10 days when they're not at the surface, they park at 1,000 meters. So they're halfway down out of the biological fouling zone. So they stay below. They actually measure the currents down below. Oh, thank you. You can put it someplace. Yeah, it's not going to stand up very well. The easel is busted. There we go. Don't touch. The current array of, the existing array of Argo data, Argo floats that measure temperature and salinity has been at sort of full strength, about 4,000 floats for about 20 years now. So this can be used to map these marine heat waves over the years and their vertical structure. I'll show an example from that. This is well-supported international array. There are some problems with keeping the funding going, but I think there's a lot of will to make sure that the gaps are filled and that if things start to fall apart a little bit, the governments that fund this will find the funding to fill it in. And as Jim mentioned, as part of the Global Ocean Observing System, all data is available online, free of charge, and you get it in real time. I'd recommend if you care about your quality, you wait for a delayed mode data, but you can use the data right away. And 4,000 floats over the whole globe. On the right, I show a second emergent Argo type array. These are biogeochemical floats, and I'll show some examples from them. This is an array that's being built by the international community, but there's a large amount of National Science Foundation money in it right now to develop the array and build it out to global. The total array will be 1,000 floats, and the NSF portion is about 500 to 600 floats. So it's about half of the global array. So what I do in my daily life is find ships to get these put on. We are a consortium of several different institutions, UW, Woods Hole, and Scripps, putting together floats, sending them out, working on data management, making sure that all of these sensors, there's extra sensors at the top here and the bottom, are well calibrated and that the data are available. So what we're measuring on these, in addition to temperature and salinity, every one of them contributes to core Argo. We're also measuring oxygen nitrate, oxygen. So is it going down? Is it going up? Where is it going down? Where is it going up? Nitrate, are there nutrients out there for biology to exist on? pH, is the ocean becoming more acidic? Are we seeing changes due to things like marine heat waves? We're measuring also chlorophyll and particles and irradiance, and that's the examples I'll show. I'm going to actually change the order of what I'm showing to go to this more global view first, and then I'll come back to Papa. So this is a very recent publication by Zhang et al. In Nature Communications, using the global Argo array to look at the structure of the marine heat waves globally. So with this data set, they've gone, hey, yeah, now we can actually categorize structures. Sofia is much more involved in this than I am. So these maps, she could give you the lecture on the maps, I'm sure. But they've categorized different types of marine heat waves and mapped them out. So depending on the types of structures that she was talking about. So I think what I really want to press on you is that there is a global array out there. Red means warm, and these are different types of marine heat waves in the global array, and they've categorized them with this global data set. So that's from the temperature salinity measurements. Now with the emerging biogeochemical measurements, we can look at what the marine heat wave is doing to the ecosystem out there. So this is a time series. This is a work from Mari Biff et al. In GBC in 2019. Right after this is in the Northeast Pacific around Papa, the same exact region that Jim was talking about. This is a time series from 2009 up to 2018. Because it's a very accessible region to dump floats in the ocean, some of the most experimental early floats were put there. So there is a time series for almost 10 years of biogeochemistry of the type that we're now deploying globally. So I think it's really interesting to see what we can see with these floats. First, you see in the top row, so down there's a map down there showing all the floats that were pieced together to make this record. No float lasts for more than 4 or 5 years, so you overlap the records in that area. Okay, so the time series goes from left to right. At the top plot is temperature, the middle one is nitrate, and the bottom one is net community production, which is calculated from the nitrate. As you go along, those big red ellipses circle the marine heat wave that came along and how it looked in this pieced together Argo record. And then in the middle, you see the nitrate. You can see The blue is when, so if you go along in the nitrate, so in all of these, you can see the seasonal cycle. Warm, cold, warm, cold, warm, cold, year in and year out in the temperature. During the ellipse air times, a lot warmer and extending deeper. At the same time, you can look at the nitrate signal that comes with that. Low, higher, low, higher, low, higher. This is really important because this region is upwelling nutrients. This is important for fisheries. The whole subpolar North Pacific is really important for that. Those nutrients then support the ecosystem and the surface layer. You can see a big reaction in that first ellipse of a nutrient drawdown, so it goes way down, and it stays kind of down the next year. The net community production in the year of the big drawdown was actually quite high. It was very stratified that year with that warm water up there. Nutrients were sitting there. The bugs loved it, or the phytoplankton, should I say, loved it, not bugs. Bugs eat the phytoplankton. And in the next year, the net community production cratered and went way down. They had stripped the nutrients out, and because of the marine heat wave, because of the blob, there wasn't an additional supply. It capped the supply of nutrients to the surface layer. So the community production in the year following the initiation of the blob was sort of the interesting, sort of more catastrophic signal. The bottom plot shows net community production as you go along as more of a graph. You see some high years. You see it growing and growing. You see the up and down seasonal cycle in the black curve. There's an arrow that marks blob. In the blob year, the net community production was high. In the purple one, blob plus ENSO, and it's the second year of the blob, it went way down. So this is the kind of thing we can do with biogeochemical Argo. With a growing array, globally, we can do this in all the locations shown on these maps where you find marine heat waves. And so it's wide open. Data sets available. Go out there and grab it and start looking at what's happening seasonally. Thanks.
Thank you, Lynn. All right, Tammy.
Let's see. I will go on to your slide. Here we are.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tammy Russell from Scripps Oceanography. I'm a PhD candidate and marine ecologist. My research focuses on seabirds, which are important, abundant marine predators in the marine ecosystem. But because these marine heat waves that we're talking about affect so many components of the marine ecosystem, I wanted to just give a brief overview of these impacts. There's a wide variety of impacts, so I'm going to try to summarize these and kind of taking two pathways. So first, with increased temperatures, there's usually increased harmful algal blooms, and this is due to these species having really high tolerance to high temperatures. And so they do really well when there's, this stratification or increased nutrients, and hot temperatures is prime habitat for these harmful algal blooms to kind of explode. And harmful algal blooms then affect every organism throughout the region that the marine heat wave is occurring. And these also impact fisheries and aquaculture, and just have a whole ripple of effects through these ecosystems. Now, from increased temperatures, it also affects habitat-forming species such as seagrasses, kelps, corals. Senator Whitehouse gave a great introduction to those impacts and kind of an emotional introduction to these really significant events that have been occurring. And so all three of these very important kind of groups of organisms are really important because they form habitat for species. They create these very diverse ecosystems, and when they die off or decrease, it has effects on all the organisms that live there. And so, and in addition, like kelp forests, seagrasses, these are all kind of those blue carbon storage areas. So when those decrease, it also affects the amount of carbon storage that they're able to capture. So in addition to the loss of habitat, organisms that are ectothermic, so vulnerable to whatever temperature they're within, they experience an increase in metabolism. So when the increase in temperature, that increases and ups their metabolism, meaning they need to eat more food to just sustain themselves. And typically when these marine heat waves occur, there's less food available or less prime food available for these organisms. And so they have less amount of food to eat, less amount of quality food to eat, but they need to eat more. And so that decreases their own quality as food, because these are typically mid-trophic or middle of the food web organisms. And it also can, cause die-offs of these species as well. And Sofia kind of gave us an introduction to that temperature band that organisms need to live within, these ectothermic organisms. And when that gets above a threshold for them, they either will die or they need to move. And a lot of times these movements are poleward or deeper in location, and these can affect accessibility to marine predators. So the marine predators, not only is there kind of this decreased quality in their prey, sometimes decreased abundance, but now they have to travel further to get these less quality food. And so that has massive effects. And for example, with the 2014 through 2016 heat wave, along the west coast of the United States, we had up to 1.2 million common murres die during that period. Common murres are abundant, very important marine bird in this ecosystem. They're a diving seabird that feed on forage fishes. And we had almost 100% reproductive failure in those birds, and just massive losses, up to 20% of the whole population in this area. They're not the only ones, but it was a massive event that was really startling to these impacts. And marine birds are really great because they can serve as these indicators of what's going on within the food web below them, because they are predators, and so they're capturing what's going on. So overall, these impacts can, lead to these mass mortality events, not in just seabirds, but in a variety of species. Long-term changes in food webs, and we've heard that there's this sustained warming at depth where a lot of these organisms are actually living. There's very few species that just live at the surface. And so when we have these prolonged warming events, like in 2014 to 16, that's when we see these huge impacts on the marine food web that ripple through. And of course, all of that leads to negative impacts on fisheries, aquaculture, tourism, and such. And so I just wanted to end that, all of these effects, like I already kind of stated that they vary by depth. And capturing information at depth is only through direct measurements. We can't get that from satellites, as was so clearly, shown in these figures. And linking that physical oceanography, what's going on in our biology, is really critical for understanding not only climate models and weather forecasting and all of these things, but understanding the ecological responses to these different marine heat waves. Because as Jim said, none are the same. And we're kind of in this new territory of understanding the variety of heat waves and the consequences of heat waves. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, and Lynne, if you want to come on up, we have some questions prepared, but if anyone in the audience has any questions?
Hi, my name is... Thank you. My name is Hasna Maudud. I am a counselor, IUCN counselor for South and East Asia. And my expertise and interest is in the marine areas. I have a turtle hatchery that I run privately in Bay of Bengal in St. Martin's Island. This is the only coral island of Bangladesh. And what is very exciting that you are now talking about heat beneath the surface. This is a very new, at least a very new experience. A few years ago, or even recently, turtles are found, these are sea turtles, turtles are found on the edge of the land, last end of the land, dead. And so the local, it happened one year after another, and the local journalists termed it as what is the word? You take your own life? Suicide. They took it as suicide. Now, the water is not seemingly hot. You know, water more or less has the same type. We cannot really measure the heat of the water, but we don't have any mechanism. But what strikes me is that something has disturbed them, that they are in masses dying. And it could be the heat, because these are all sea turtles. You know, it is olive redly and green. And so only when they are dead in a mass, then this word called suicide is being created. My question is that I wish this information would be more available, and we are so land biased, terrestrial biased, that, you know, we hardly look into the ocean. And yet that will decide our future. That will decide, you know, which way climate is going, if there is going in a healthy way or unhealthy way. So I thank you for your interest. My question is, would you consider including Bay of Bengal, Indian Ocean, because this is a very thriving area. It has a lot of not only human population, but also marine population, and they are in extreme stress, not just due to overfishing, but I think also things that are happening beyond our knowledge. So I would request you to also put one of your experiments in Bay of Bengal, Indian Ocean. Thank you very much.
So first, again, I think there's other people chomping at the bit. We have put a mooring with INQUOS in the Bay of Bengal. So we care about the Bay of Bengal too. And I just want to make the point, there's been a lot of talk about cheaper more sensors. Temperature's one where you can do that. So temperature's one where you can deploy subsurface sensors, for example, that are not too expensive and probably have to harvest them later, but you can get those measurements without an elaborate observatory like we have. And so that's it. That's all I'm going to say.
We'd like to partner with you.
I'll give you my card.
And I also say that Argo, the profiling floats are definitely in the Bay of Bengal. And so you can look at the temperature structure throughout the Bay of Bengal. It's in the deeper part of the ocean. So if what you're looking at is more coastal, then the type of instrumentation that Jim is talking about may be more what you'd need sort of down into the habitat of the turtles. But you can certainly look at evidence for and progression of marine heat waves and their vertical structure. What we're adding through the biogeochemical Argo is not there yet in the Bay of Bengal. It's very important because it's a very, very low oxygen area below the surface. It's an oxygen minimum, very, very low. And to be able to measure and monitor that over many, many years. And I was hoping to have a ship to drop them in April, but I think it's not going to happen. But we're working on it. we will get into the Bay of Bengal. Yeah. Oh, yeah. How?
Bangladesh has one of them. Very deep is a word for it.
Canyons. Yeah, it's canyons. Oh, because of the so many rivers coming off. Yeah. Yeah.
I think all over the world.
Yeah.
So it will be very interesting. While we are saying Bay of Bengal is dying, lack of oxygen, whatever, but we also have a region that we don't know anything about, and these are the canyons, and their life is thriving in another way.
Yeah.
I don't want to forget about our online. Sofia, did you have something to add to that?
Yes.
Okay.
So first of all, I would like to assure you that there's a lot of research in the Bay of Bengal, studying the physical mechanism that is that are in place when marine heat waves are happening. There's a lot of research going on, both regional and global. But also, if I know that your question is more relevant to deeper layers because of the turtles, but there is an online tool which is called Marine Heat Waves Tracker, and it's giving at any given moment a global map where you can see the extreme warm temperatures developing. So you can have a look, maybe the days that you're seeing the phenomenon with the turtles, if a marine heat wave had started like a few days before or is happening at the moment, so you can inform yourselves there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sofia. All right. Are there any other questions from the audience? Give y'all. Oh.
Thank you. My name is Novi Adi. I'm a geospatial analyst from the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries, Indonesia. Probably my question is directed to Sophie and Jim. It's particularly about how, the difference between the NOAA's bleaching alert, bleaching alert system and probably the marine heat wave observing system. Because, for example, the NOAA's bleaching alert is also developed from the long-term sea surface temperature anomaly. They also use the formula called like the degree heating weeks, derived also from the climatological maximum. And then if it exceeds, if the temperature on a particular area exceeds like 2 weeks from the climatological maximum temperature, then it is red, meaning it's there is a very strong tendency for the bleachings. But of course, it is on the surface. So how it's different and how it is used in complementary with the marine heat wave system, if any. Yeah, thank you.
Sofia, you want to take that one first?
So I'm not sure if I understood correctly. The question is, how can the marine heat wave definition or system complement the degree heating weeks for the corals? Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
So, to be honest with you, I'm not very familiar with the system from NOAA, so I cannot speak for them. But what I can say for the marine heat wave definition, it's an ongoing discussion about the definition itself and whether this one definition should apply to every different ecosystem, including corals as well. What I can tell you is that you can use this definition and change some properties and some initial conditions and tune it to the ecosystem that you want to look at. For example, in the Red Sea, we're doing a study on the corals and when they are bleaching by taking observations on corals on what kind of temperatures they're bleaching, and then trying to find what are the settings of the marine heat wave system for that particular region in order to actually locate these marine heat waves that appear to create the coral bleaching. I'm not sure if this answers your question, but the actual definition itself, it's quite flexible when it comes to adaptation to specific ecosystems.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wanted to? Okay. All right. Oh, question in the back.
I'm not a scientist or anything, but are there any of these seaweeds or seagrasses that are more resilient, and is there a way to kind of adapt and to encourage adaptation? And is there any positive effect of these seagrasses and seaweeds on heating?
Tammy, do you want to touch that one?
Yes, there are. I don't study those, but I know there are species of seagrasses and algae. I know they're like turf algae do really well in those conditions, which is actually a really bad thing for kelp forest. So kelp thrive in these cold, nutrient-rich waters, and when it heats up, they do really poorly, and there could be huge losses of kelp. But as that's happening, these turf algae will take over kind of those ecosystems and add to it. So it's this loop where the turf algae are taking over and the kelp aren't doing well. And that actually kind of inhibits them from recovering after these marine heat waves. And so like off the coast of Western Australia in the heat wave in 2011, there was like a 43% loss of habitat of their kelp forest, and they found, you know, they've been having a hard time recovering, and it's because of those interactions between the two. But even with fishes, we see that there are some species that are winners. They can do well in those conditions, and some that don't. So during these marine heat waves, we're going to see the whole kind of ecosystem shift, and it will be different. And depending on where you are and kind of the functional ecology between those relationships will kind of dictate how they'll be able to recover from these events. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, so we have just a... Oh.
I just have a comment, a question. Because of the incredible decline in net primary productivity, phytoplankton at the surface of the ocean, we've seen an enormous decline in copepod activity in the ocean. Those are the grazers of the plankton. And copepods are, in fact, a miraculous ocean heat pump, right? Because they spend the daytime in the very deep cold water, right at the deep thermocline boundary. And every evening they swim as fast as they can to the surface. And so trillions of copepods swim up to the top of plankton blooms every evening. And each copepod is an ice cube, relatively. So they're actually doing a physical heat transfer to the surface ocean. And all night long they graze and they warm up. And before the sun rises, they quickly swim back down to the deep thermocline abyss. And so they create this great vertical cooling, vertical circulation cell. So I think the actually biggest impact on the world's oceans, on the thermal condition of the surface ocean, is actually the collapse of the copepod pump.
That's
right. So I wondered if you.
I was just going to say I know nothing about that, but that's fantastic to hear about that. I would say, oh no, she likes that. I will say this is. There are instruments that we maintain on these observatories that look at zooplankton with bioacoustic sensors that watch the migration of the zooplankton. And actually, you can trick them by having an eclipse. We found they'll migrate to the top during an eclipse, for example.
Yeah, they don't come up on the night of a full moon.
Right.
Right, as well.
But we do have measurements to study just that, and again, we'd love people to use.
But from a thermal situation in the ocean, the most immediate and effective means to get the ocean back to a healthy, cool condition is to restore net primary productivity at the surface.
Yeah.
Right.
And thank you for that comment. That was a nice note to end on. We are out of time. We went just a tiny bit over. Thanks for your attention today. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you for joining us remotely, Sofia. I wish you were here, but this worked out great.
Next time.
And everyone have a good rest of your day. Thank you.